Blah, 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 blah.
I gotta watch it. You start talking about camera gear before we were recording.
Here's a quick put your headphones on. I was told that you were always recording.
Yeah, that's true.
I haven't even started a timer. I'll start a timer later.
At some arbitrary time that has nothing to do with when we actually start recording the show.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
You just said that we're always recording, and so I'll start a timer, and then the show will be a set amount of time after the timer starts.
Yeah, which is anywhere between 10 minutes and an hour and 45 minutes, if last week is any indication.
What was our shortest show? What, like 42 minutes or something?
We definitely have had some under an hour.
But have we had any?
I don't know if we've ever gone under 45 minutes, but it's got to be somewhere.
We've ever gone under 50 minutes.
Yeah, I don't
so
know.
Maybe 45 minutes is the bottom.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh,
it just feels like that'd be I feel like the people would be disappointed if we gave them a 45 minute
45 minute is like a topic.
Yeah.
That's like a pre-show.
I feel like the whole premise of the show is that we go deep on stuff, and it's like you can't do that.
Point is, I kind of like the idea of us just getting 2 Pixuses as our camera solution. And so I've been thinking about that more.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, well, that would mean like a raw workflow. And maybe I should just like try that for a while and see if it's like actually better. And I know that shooting raw on the XH2S is not the same as shooting with a Pixus. Like, it's just not the same. So full frame camera versus APS-C. It is... I mean, I'm not going to get like all of a sudden better image quality. I'm just going to get more malleable images.
Yeah. But you could probably still learn some things about what is the workflow like. And like you're so familiar with editing XH2S footage that you could maybe get some idea of a delta between like compressed versus raw.
Yeah. So I'm considering pulling out my Dusty Ninja, which your discussion of like regrettable purchases reminded me of this. But I can pull out my Ninja and I can rig up my camera and then like for a little while just shoot recording to the Ninja.
Yeah.
And like try that as a workflow.
So with the Ninja, you can do ProRes RAW, but you can't do Blackmagic RAW. So how would that work with your editing workflow?
So there's a lot of options out there as far as camera RAW conversion, where you can convert it into Cinema DNG or CNG or CN. I forget exactly the abbreviation, but it's Cinema DNG. It's DNG, like DNG is an open RAW format, and this is just that, but with stacked video codecs. And so the DaVinci Resolve will handle Cinema DNG just fine as a RAW codec. And so it's a matter of just kind of converting it from ProRes into something else. And there's a lot of different applications that'll do that. And so I'm considering doing that instead of not even just like processing and compressing, but actually converting it into either a uncompressed video codec, kind of like I could do ProRes RAW into ProRes, but I want to be able to do all like the color management stuff. So probably Cinema DNG would be the answer. Anyways, I want to kind of try that as a workflow because that would also be something that would have to happen if we switch to shooting with Pixuses for all of like our pro-ish work.
Yeah, I do think it'd be interesting to try that. And I'm also curious, like if I was to get a Pixus and use it, like let's say I occasionally wanted to use it to shoot an event or something, how bad would it really be to take that raw footage and, develop it or whatever and then, transcode it into H.265 and deliver it? Like, is that something I can do, quickly, or do I need like, a long time to tweak stuff to do that? So I think it'd be interesting.
I've never lost footage shooting on a Ninja, but I have never had a long form use case with a Ninja where I didn't have issues, where because of the drive that was in it, I got a Kangaroo, or it just geeked out on me and I had to recover the footage and just stopped recording. Like, I've never had like 100% reliability with the Ninja, and so that anytime I'm thinking about doing external recording, it makes me nervous.
Yeah, I feel like getting the right drive is a big part of it. And I'm remembering back when we did that TV shoot, we shot that on Ninjas.
Yep.
And I think we had the Kangaroo happen a couple of times, and I feel like we got like a different drive or something, and then it was fine.
Yeah, swap the drive and kind of go from there. Because there are certain drives where it just seems like they slow down when they're partially full if you don't get something from the exact approved list that Atomos publishes. It just really, really matters that you get like a WD Blue or something like that.
Yeah, whatever was on. I can't remember what all was on their approved list, but yeah, that seemed like it mattered a lot.
Yeah, so I'm considering I'm like, not just like, maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm going to do it. I'm going to rig up my camera into a RAW workflow format, and I'm going to try shooting in RAW for a little bit and just kind of see what happens.
I feel like I'm kind of, maybe also going to try the Ninja again because I just recently got the Atomos Connect.
Man, that was such a good deal too.
It was.
I almost bought one, and then I was like, I don't use the Ninja. I really have no use for this.
I was literally about to list mine on eBay, and then I started doing I don't know what I was looking at, but I found this Atomos Connect thing.
You were about to sell your Ninja, and then you were like, what if I doubled down?
Yeah. So it's this thing that screws onto the back of the Ninja and gives you like wireless, Ethernet, and timecode, and so an SDI.
That's the big one.
It turns the Ninja into something that can record SDI in and works with Atomos's wireless timecode stuff. And I think you can do like camera to cloud type workflows with it. I also think there's some sort of software unlock for it that I need to do some research into this, but I think there's like a software deal you can do that then lets you wirelessly monitor the Ninja, like from a phone or an iPad or something. And so like it seems like a pretty neat upgrade for the Ninja. And it was on sale recently for $100 new. Like not $100 off. Like the total price was $100. So I was like, yes, I'm picking that up.
Super good deal.
Yeah. So I haven't tried it yet. It's sitting over there still in the box. But
I almost bought it. Like I almost did. I just don't like.
Well, my big reason for getting it, which it's going to be funny if you ever end up regretting this, but my big reason for getting it was that if I get a Pixis, I felt like I could stick the Ninja with this thing on here and it would like link into our timecode network.
Yeah. Yeah,
or if we're shooting a music video and I've got like, here's somebody's S5 Mark II or here's an Ursa or whatever, like it's just like this extra timecode thing I can drop onto something.
It seems super, super useful. And every time you talk about it, I get super excited. I'm like, I absolutely need one of these. And then I start thinking about everything that we do in all our use cases. And I'm like, that would sit in the box with the Ninja in my office.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of a risk for me too, but I also figured if I do end up selling the Ninja, it's quite a bit of a value add on it. So
yeah, that's probably true. Woof.
Yep.
So we'll see.
We just jumped right into the show, didn't we?
Yeah, no, that's all pre-show. Actually, that's
okay.
Actually,
none of those topics count.
That's pre-show. Do you use Safari tab groups?
I don't use tab groups on anything, and I feel like I should.
So I started using tab groups as more of a way that, like, iCloud tabs kind of suck. And I always I'm like doing something on my phone and then I get home and I switch to my phone computer, which is my iPad. And I'm like, I want to open up the thing that was on my phone and like the iCloud tabs just kind of stink to try to open. But if you use tab groups, those sync perfectly. And so I have in my tab groups on the left in Safari, I have like a Camera Gear podcast tab group. And anything that I'm researching on my phone or on my computer that is related to the podcast, I will put into that group. And then whenever I get to the podcast, it's just all there and open.
Man.
And so, and it works pretty well. So like I have great. like a news and a travel. And if I'm like researching stuff, like I have a roof rack one when I was looking for roof racks for a tent to go on the truck. And anyways, so it's like, I have a bunch of tab groups over here that are just like, oh, these are all the websites that I normally check. And I just want them like there and open, but not like cluttering my main start page.
It's kind of like bookmarks, but, not exactly like that, because I guess you're holding the state of which specific page you're on.
Right, because like I can never get good consistent. Like I've never figured out bookmarks. I don't know how they work. I don't understand them. I'll try to use bookmarks in Chrome, but it's like I can't put them into a top level folder. You can only put them 3 folders down, and they can only be called new bookmark 1 folder. And I don't know. I've never been able to figure out bookmarks.
I don't have any of these problems. It feels like a very basic concept of how web browsers work. Bookmarks, it's surprising to me that you don't know how to use them.
Are more complicated than I can stand. I can't figure them out. I've never been able to. I don't understand them.
I want to dig into that. I feel like we don't have time to dig into that. The question I really want to ask, though, is are you I feel like there's 2 types of people. There's people where you look at their web browser and they have 1 to 3 tabs open. And then there's people that have so many tabs open that you can't see any text of what's on the tab. Like hundreds of tabs. And you're talking about tab groups. This makes you think, like, I can't decide which of those sides you're on. So
okay,
which one are you?
So the way that I use my web browser is like when I close the browser, like it's all done. And I've never had a good way to save state. And like I would love it if I could just say, hey, when I close you browser, when you open back up all the tabs. That feature never works for me. It's just, I don't know. And so I'm an all the tab kind of person. I usually have tons of tabs because like the way that I will research things is I'll go to like Google or whatever and I'll search it and then I'll like command click or whatever. I'll open tabs for all of the links that I want to look at,
and then slowly go through them.
And then I'll work through those tabs. And whenever I've gone through all the tabs, I know that I'm done researching that topic.
Mm-hmm.
So that's which is like whenever Edge released that feature where like color coded tabs based upon the source tab that you opened it from was amazing for me because I'm like, here's the magenta ones and here's the blue ones, and that worked out great.
I need to turn that on. That sounds pretty useful.
It's super useful. Anyway, but now that I've been starting like. When you close the browser, you lose all the state. And the tab groups have enabled me to, because like, you don't understand how to use bookmarks, that's enabled me to like keep certain page groups together, and it syncs more correctly across my web browsers. And so I've really enjoyed using tab groups in Safari.
Interesting.
Which probably the only person? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a pretty useful feature. I feel like definitely on my phone and iPad, I'm limiting tabs as much as possible. Like I have very few things open at once, and but I can see the value of being able to research stuff and like keep it open, and especially for things like this podcast, where like during the week maybe I find something I want to talk about, but then like forget about it or can't find the page when I need it. So it's a cool idea. You
just got to do it. The other thing, I mean, I don't know if you know this, Daniel, but if you're like in on your iPad or on your phone and like you open up the tab view, you can like select a tab to move it around in the view, and then you just start tapping other ones, and it piles them up under one finger. And then you can like swipe over to wherever you want to put it, and you can drop them into the tab group.
There's a lot of multi-finger workflows with the iOS stuff that I feel like are not very discoverable, because usually when I'm using any of these devices, I'm only using one hand at a time, and I'm not thinking about anything that would require me to use both hands.
It's all power user stuff, man. Apparently. You just got to get on that level. Yeah. I'm just saying that like sometimes I might be on my iPad and I've opened up, I'll accidentally started doing camera research, and I'm like, oh man, I got to move all 10 of these tabs over. Put my finger on one of them, and I just tap the other 9, drag, drop, done.
Just drag, drop, done.
Easy peasy. That's like my biggest power user tip for any iPad stuff is, it's really annoying because you have to like, I want to share this to another app, and I want to move this file, or I want to like move these tabs, and hitting like open, move, select this thing is redundant and really annoying. Most of the time you can just drag and drop.
Yeah.
And it's like 8 out of 10 times dragging and dropping basically just works between apps, between interfaces, and just try it.
Yeah.
It's like,
just try it.
Just try drag and dropping. Maybe like, here's a picture on a web page that I want to like text somebody. Drag it, hold it with one finger, open up, swipe over to your text app, drop it in. Boom.
Easy.
Like you just drag and drop.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. Okay. We got to get into the real pre-show here, Daniel. By the time people are listening to this, it will be after the first F1 race.
Wow. That break wasn't very long.
It was an eternity. I don't know what you're
not long enough.
So the new Drive to Survive season is out as of like yesterday, which really dates when we're recording this. And so I've started watching it, obviously, and now I'm like reliving the drama from last season.
So the season that just came out was about last season,
right? And they released it like they released it this Friday, and then the first race is a week from Sunday.
I see.
That way you can like really,
get
into the mood.
The timing actually kind of makes sense. It's kind of like it's like when you watch the new season of a TV show and they have like the flashbacks at the beginning.
Yeah, that's basically exactly what this is. Yeah. So I'm reliving all the drama, loving every minute of it. I've only watched one episode. It's fine. And I mean, the show is just really annoying mostly because it's like soundbite. And it's very like, it's not as bad as like network TV, but
I thought I'd heard good things about it.
I mean, everyone loves the show. It's just, it's very like sensational and music building and like really hypes everything up.
Yeah, it feels like a little dramatized maybe.
Yeah, kind of heavy-handed, and sometimes that stuff really annoys me, but also it's like effective. Anyway, so super pumped about watching it. Anyways, I want to throw out my predictions for this season for F1 2025.
So, well, let's hear it. We can. We're recording, so we'll be able to see if these happen or not.
Exactly. So we're going into the season. We have like, I think it's 5 rookie drivers this year. Last year, 2024, no new drivers, same teams. This year, I was like total reshuffle. 5 rookies, anything can happen. I think that, let's see, I've been thinking about this all off season, but I actually haven't come to a conclusion. I'm pulling for, I always forget the drivers' names. Help me out here, Daniel.
I don't think I'm the person to do this for you.
Leclerc. I always forget Leclerc's name. Sorry. It's like, I'm like,
that's embarrassing.
Science. Anyways, he's who I even have a Ferrari at, and he's pointed. Okay, I think I'm shooting for Leclerc for the World Driver Championship. Now it's probably gonna be Max Verstappen. We all know it's gonna be Max, but I don't know if Red Bull's gonna pull it together in this final season of this car model before we switch to the rule change in 2026. So I'm thinking that Red Bull is probably going to end up somewhere around 1, 2, or 3 as far as the Constructors Championship. But I'm going to put Leclerc as my World Driver Championship for this year, coming in second, Lando Norris, and then third, Max Verstappen. And I think that I'm like really pulling for Hamilton with Ferrari, but I think that he's going to disappoint. And it's going to be like shocking or whatever that he doesn't do better than Leclerc.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's going to be so much drama around it. And
of these drivers you mentioned, are they all with the same team they were with last year? Like, I mean, they move around sometimes, right?
Yeah, it's like a total reshuffle this year. The only ones that are the same, McLaren has the same drivers and Aston Martin has the same drivers. Everyone else is different.
I see.
I'm really pulling for Carlos Sainz with Williams. I'm hoping that he comes in like the top half of the teams. Williams just doesn't have a very good car, but like it seems like we're seeing some pretty good improvements for 2025. So I'm like super pulling for Sainz because he's really good. He's a really good driver. He just got booted for the best driver, which is Hamilton, who has like 7 World Driver Championships.
So you talk a lot about like obviously the driver's skill is a huge percentage of their like potential, and then I know like the car matters a lot, and sometimes it's like Ferrari has a bad car this year or whatever. What are the other major factors there? Like, because I know with a lot of this racing stuff, there's like strategy involved in terms of like when they pit or like what tires they use and things like that. Is that stuff that is determined? Like, is there somebody on the team that makes those decisions? Like, I guess I'm trying to think, like, is it pretty much like driver plus car, or is there like a third or fourth component that kind of really factors in?
There's so many things, Daniel. There's like so many things. You have like, there's the driver, obviously. There's the car, of course. There's the engineer and their team that's monitoring all the car stuff as far as like how fast is the tire wearing in this track? Are we getting any sort of like whatever pitting into the tires? Like, is it reacting exactly per our models and like how we're expecting? Do we make any adjustments at the pit, like, or like on the fly? And they're doing all monitoring of all the car stuff to make sure the car is operating as optimally as possible through the laps and degrading as expected through the laps, so they can determine like when is optimal pit strategy and all this sort of stuff. And then you have your race strategy part of that team that's trying to determine like when do we pit which car and how are the other cars doing in relation to our cars, and like if we pit now, are we going to undercut, or is that going to give us like, can we hold back some other teams with our second car in this situation to then like get our first car out farther at the pit, and like
so none of that is stuff that like the driver is not determining that. That's like they
have a whole team of people that's figuring all of that out. And so like there's that component of it, and there's like the pit crew mechanic component of it, and then obviously the driver and the car, and then when it comes to the car, it's like the whole team that's doing the car development.
So it's kind of like driver plus car plus team, and all of those things matter. And a team could potentially have a bad car, but have like really good people or something, and that could make a difference.
Yeah, it all makes a difference. I mean, we're talking hundredths of a second.
Yeah,
every 0.1 second matters, and like sometimes you have Ferrari who can't figure out how to do calls on a race.
Yeah, sometimes.
There was one time last year where they were like, "Come on in for a pit stop, Carlos," and he was like, "Why? It doesn't make sense for me to come in." They're like, "Do it." He's okay. He starts pulling into the pit lane. They go, "Just kidding. Don't come in. Don't come in. Don't come in." And he had to like cut the line to get out of the pit lane, got a penalty for it, and then he pitted the next time around.
Wow.
And it's like, guys, what are you doing?
Yeah, that just sounds disorganized. Bad management.
Yep. Bunch of clowns. Anyway, I'm excited for this season. It's going to be great.
I can definitely tell. Welcome back to the Camera Gear Podcast. I'm Daniel.
And I'm Lucas.
And we're here today to talk about the gear, software, and techniques we use to shoot photos and video.
Okay, so I want to mostly talk about the new Sigma BF.
Yes,
because
I've been looking forward to that.
The camera is something else, but there's a few preambly things that I want to kind of run through here.
Yeah, sounds good.
Fuji released a firmware to fix some of the aperture weirdness with the new 16 to 55 f2.82. I kind of complained about that in a previous episode. I did update to that firmware on the XH2S, and in video mode, the aperture ring changing whenever you go into declick mode is significantly smoothed out.
Yeah, you were complaining about that, and it felt like the next week they released that firmware update, and that was good to see. I saw that firmware it's
good to hear that Fuji's listening to this podcast.
That's what I was thinking too. That firmware also had a thing where you can set the focus throw for focus by wire lenses, which is pretty cool.
Not all of them, I don't think. But I did set it on the 16 to 55, so that's cool.
Yeah, it's like you can set it like the total throw, I think, and it was like 10-degree increments or something. You can get very granular with how you do that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, so that was that. I think other thing, you were upcoming events on here?
Yeah, I just thought it'd be interesting to mention a couple of things coming up. So I think this episode is going to come out a couple of days before the Fuji X Summit on March 20th. So that's been kind of rumored and looks like it's going to happen. The big thing we're expecting to see is a fixed lens GFX camera. So we'll see what happens, but that's the plan. Are you going to be attending the Fuji X Summit?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's in Prague this year.
Sweet.
Yeah. Looking forward to that. I think my invite might have gotten lost in the mail though.
Yeah, well, they only send it to the important people on this podcast.
And then the other thing is the NAB show is in Las Vegas on April 5th through 9th. So that's also like right around the corner. And that one's always really exciting too. It's just a lot of video gear. I'm interested to see what Blackmagic announces. Seems like they always do a presentation there. It's usually their CEO in like a QVC style, like standing behind a counter, pulling products out and talking about them. So it's honestly like one of the camera keynotes I look forward to most. It's just very entertaining.
You didn't even list CP Plus in here.
That one's already happened.
I know, it was like last week.
Yeah. So CP Plus had some stuff. I think they actually had the Sigma BF on display at that one. And there's some other L mount news and some other lens stuff. So a lot of
it's actually most of what we're covering today. So.
A lot of good camera events in the spring. And I guess the one's already happened, and then we got 2 more to go.
Yep, and you're just chomping at the bit for NAB.
Yes. Yeah, I'm curious to see what they announce. Like, I think I would not want to buy another video camera until that event happens, just to see like what's gonna come. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that when it happens.
I was at the Houston rodeo last week, and there was a lot of like airing different things live, and most of the live video that wasn't at the arena were using those fancy camcorders that we had talked about a few weeks ago. The ones that are like $3,000 and have Mike Jackson outputs and that sort of thing.
I think it's just a really easy solution for stuff like that because it's kind of like all in one deal. You don't need like this camera rig with wires hanging all off of it and stuff. It's just kind of like a single integrated body that basically has everything you need.
You don't have to train anyone to focus because everything's in focus.
Yeah. It's like F22.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Another previous episode, I was complaining substantially about corrections in camera and modern lenses. And my friend Carl Zeiss, you may have heard of him, he heard me. And he was like, I got you. And they released the new Zeiss Otus lenses. Really just one, and then another one's coming.
And Zeiss doesn't really make that many lenses anymore, do they?
Zeiss hasn't made lenses since 2019.
And I feel like we've talked about that on this show of like, it'd be cool if Zeiss made more lenses. And then, another case where these brands are tuned into the Camera Gear podcast and making big decisions about the future of their company based on what they hear in the show. And here we are.
Exactly. I mean, they really came in with a splash here by announcing two new Otus lenses. Kind of a big deal. I wrote here in the notes, "Ain't no Carlos Zeus." Anyways,
yep.
So as you know, but maybe other people don't know, the Otus lenses were like the most premium Zeiss lenses that you could get in the DSLR era. This is really Zeiss's first, it's not their first foray into mirrorless cameras, because there's some mirrorless lenses out there. There's a really nice 12mm 2.8 for Fuji that they make, but they haven't done a ton of like full frame mirrorless stuff, and they haven't released a new Otus lens in a really long time. And the Otus lenses are particular in that they are, like, sometimes you'll optimize for weight or for quality or for different things in the design. And the concept with those Otus lenses is the best image quality, period. It doesn't matter how much it weighs. It doesn't matter how much it costs. It doesn't matter how big it is. Make it the best. Do all the correction in lens so that you're not having to apply a profile afterwards. We want the most best image that you can get off the back of the glass.
You like the sound of that, don't you?
I sure do, Daniel. I'm getting sick and tired of these companies using software as an excuse to make their images better. Give me the real thing.
Yep.
Do it in the lens. Zeiss heard me.
Yep.
So they released the 50mm 1.4, and they're coming soon the 85mm 1.4. And these lenses are manual focus only, and they are for E, Z, and RF mount. Zeiss isn't in the L mount allowance, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And so they're not going to be for L mount. Kind of disappointing, because I'm used to everything being for L mount whenever it's a third-party lens, but that's because everything is from Sigma.
Yeah.
Anyway, so kind of a bummer there, but mostly fine. It does have electronic contacts on it so that you can know what lens you're shooting on. These lenses and the original Otus lenses are apochromatic, which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
So they're supposed to perfectly converge light. And the big deal or whatever about these Zeiss lenses is micro contrast. It feels like such a buzzword.
It does.
Like when you look at images off of these lenses, the detail is where these Zeiss lenses really matter and just really, really stand out. If you take an image that was shot on an Otus lens and you zoom into 800%, there's a point where as you get finer and finer into the detail of the image, that if you can't converge the light perfectly, especially wide open, like you're shooting 1.4, 1.8, they're light waves are hard to converge, and there can be some level of diffraction or light splitting that will soften parts of the image, and the finer details get lost. Mm-hmm. And particularly the light and the dark parts of those finer details may kind of get mushed together. And so you have less distinctive edges at the finer points of the frame. And so the concept of good micro contrast, which sounds like a total marketing buzzword, is you take a picture of a fence or something, and then you look at the wood on the fence and the splintering of the grains, and you can really see the detail, and it really, really stands out when you have a lens that can resolve extremely effectively. I guess that's it. Extremely effective. And so you get this better contrast in the details, and you're more of it's kind of coming out. And so by being able to do that at wide open at 1.4, you're able to get the pop of the image from it, just you getting that separation from having a low depth of field. And so they prioritize getting that super smooth transition into the blurry background, and 10 aperture blades, so all your bokeh's nice and round, and there's no onion ringing. It's very smooth, very good looking bokeh, and it transitions extremely, extremely smoothly. And so you have this really good fall off for your image, and so it makes everything pop. It makes the background look good, and then you have this really good resolving detail, and so it makes all the details stand out, your subjects stand out, and then the background separation look really good.
It's also notable if they're doing that at the widest aperture, because usually lenses are a little soft at the widest aperture.
Mm-hmm. And some of the preliminary testing of the 50mm lens that I saw, it works almost perfectly at f2. When you get into 1.4 on this new Otus lenses, if you're shooting something that's extremely backlit, there is a little bit of fringing, a little bit of chromatic aberration.
Okay. So it's not like a true APO.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, like they're saying it's APO, but like it shouldn't do that if it was. And like there's a little bit of longitudinal chromatic aberration in the lens where like you are getting a little bit of the splitting of the greens and blues. So it's not perfect. That stuff all kind of goes away at f2, but it performs really, really well at 1.4, especially for a lens that is not doing. It's doing it all in the lens, right? You're not doing correction in post. You're not really applying a lens profile. You shouldn't have to. So
That's
like
pretty cool.
It's at 1.4 is a hard aperture to work at for these kind of lenses.
I always kind of think that the widest aperture on a lens is almost like extended ISO on a camera.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
You know, where it's like they almost provide that highest setting, like the widest aperture, as sort of like, we can do this, but you're going to give something up. Very similar to extended ISO.
It seems always to be the case with, like, if you're going to get a wide aperture lens and you're not going to pay $1 jillion for it, anything below like f2 something is like, it's a more of an artsy look.
Yeah.
Whereas the priority on these Otus lenses is like f2. Yeah, f2 is perfect. f1.4 is 95% perfect.
Yeah.
So this is like really, really cool lens that they came out
it
with. The focus they're on it is absurd. It's like 270 degrees. They made it so you can declick the aperture, but you have to like take the lens off and turn a screw on the back.
Oh,
but
weird.
it's got a declickable aperture. It doesn't like, it zooms a bit when you focus, so it's not really like a super good video lens. And it's like $2,500.
I mean, you know, I think that as time has gone on, I can understand more why people would pay so much for a lens. And I think that like when you first get into photography, it's more like, I want to try all these different lenses out and I don't know what I like. And I like, sometimes I want this and other times I want that. And like, it doesn't feel like you'd want to spend this much on a lens because you know, you can't build a whole collection of $2,500 lenses. But I think as you get more experience, you kind of learn like what you really like. And I guess between that and also having seen how much better a good lens can make your photos or video, it makes me feel like I'm kind of getting to the point where if there was a focal length that I knew I used a lot, I would consider spending a lot of money on a lens to get like that little bit of extra quality, because like, I mean, ultimately it is one of the most important parts of what makes pictures good.
This is a tough one, I think. Zeiss has been kind of out of the game for 6 years. And in the DSLR days with slapping mirrors, these Otus lenses and the Zeiss look really, really stood out. If you were getting a Zeiss lens, it was going to be probably the best lens you could get for that mount and be like the sharpest, and it's going to be expensive, but it's going to look amazing. Since like in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot of lens releases. Canon has really filled out the RF line. Sony's been getting better and better at making G Masters. And like there is some grandeur in the Zeiss name, but I don't know how well they're going to be able to carry here in the mirrorless world. Those short flange backs have solved a lot of the softness problems in these fast primes that we've seen in the past. And the RF L series lenses are really stinking good.
Yeah.
And the G Master lenses are really stinking good. And they have autofocus.
Yeah.
And they have fast autofocus, which makes you shooting these things at 1.4, 1.2 way more manageable.
Well, and especially for photos, I feel like I want autofocus. Like even if I'm going to adjust something manually, I want to be able to, use like back button autofocus to lock it in. And this lens having some, what would would it be focus breathing? Is that what the focus?
Yeah, there's some focus breathing.
Yeah, so like focus breathing and manual focus to me don't go together too well.
No.
So if I'm going to use it for video, I don't want focus breathing, but I'm like happier honestly with manual focus. If I'm going to use it for photo, I don't care about focus breathing, but I want the autofocus motor.
I mean, any of these 1.2, 1.4 primes, 85, 50 are going to focus breathe like crazy.
Yeah.
Unless you get a cinema lens.
It's understandable, but I'm just saying like it makes it a little compromised for either photo or video in my mind.
Yeah, I guess I could see that. I just think that in comparison to like where they are sitting in the market, if you're comparing this to a Sony G Master 50mm 1.4 or like a Canon 50mm 1.2 L USM, they're going to breathe the exact same.
Yeah, but they have autofocus motors.
Right. They have autofocus.
So, like,
and
for
the Sony
photos,
has
it's-
breathing compensation.
Yeah. So like for photos, that's going to be better in my mind.
Right. And the G Master is like $1,200. So it's half the price of this thing.
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper.
For the Canon and for like the Nikon, you're going to be paying like $2,400 anyway. Excuse me.
Man, you got a little
Sorry, I
excited
almost
there.
had like a hiccup. I was like super pumped. $2,500. Anyways, excuse me. It's like you're going to pay more for the Zeiss and get less features, but what you do get is correction in lens
and micro contrast.
Yeah, and micro contrast. But also like you're not providing a lens profile, and so the edges of these photos, like that contrast and that like sharpness of the edges is going to be better. I mean, you shoot on a Canon lens that has like a third stop or 2/3 stop of vignetting on the corners. The corners are just going to be noisier after lens correction is applied. Whereas on the Zeiss lens, those corners are going to be that much better.
Yeah.
So I think that there is some benefit, and I do think that you are going to see way better image quality out of something like this, and Zeiss can still stand there and say, this is optically the best 50mm lens you can buy for your camera system. I don't care what camera system you're in. It is the best. But I don't know if it's going to be that much better that's going to make people want to pay more for a manual focus lens.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's the question. And it looks like, I think you might have said they're making it for EZ and RF mount.
That's right.
Yeah. No L mount.
No XF mount either.
Yeah. Not that you would have bought this lens for XF, but...
I thought about it.
Really? It is a 67mm filter thread on that 50.
Not too bad. It also weighs 1,000,000 pounds.
Really?
Yeah, I forget. I think it's massively heavy, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
1.5 pounds.
It's not that bad.
It's weather sealed. Oh, they have those T-Star coatings too.
Oh, nice.
Those world famous T-Star Zeiss coatings.
I would love to see Zeiss make more lenses, and like we've kind of said similar things about other camera gear stuff where I'm happy to see them make a different set of trade-offs. And if their trade-off they want to make is we're doing everything in lens, like I think that's cool. It's an interesting other option to give me, to where like I as the consumer can make the choice between that and, other different trade-offs that other lenses make. So I would love to see them like get back into making lenses and make more stuff like this.
I would like to see them join the L-Mount Alliance.
Yeah, that'd be great too.
Cool. Okay. Done with that super short topic. Let's talk about the Sigma BF. 30 minutes into the episode.
Speaking of the L mount. Yeah, so this was a big surprise. Sigma had this. They had advertised an announcement, like maybe right before the CP Plus show, and I think they had teased a lens that had never been seen before, which I think we're going to talk about at some point in this episode.
Yeah, probably that Sigma 300 to 600.
Yeah, and I can't remember if they had actually said anything else was coming. I'm pretty sure the invite for this event was like on a piece of. It was either on a piece of aluminum or it was on like paper that looked like aluminum.
Cool.
And I think there was maybe some rumors like, is Sigma going to announce a Foveon camera? Like, is what's coming? And we got this camera.
So this is not a Foveon camera, but it's a 24 megapixel backside illuminated L mount camera. Probably very similar sensor to like the S5 II and the Lumix S9 or something.
Potentially the same sensor.
Potentially the same sensor. Is Foveon dead? Are they doing it, Daniel? What's happening?
I mean, I think it could still potentially be coming. And the fact that this camera doesn't have it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But at the same time, if they were going to do it, this would have been the camera to do it on.
Maybe they release a Foveon version of this later.
Maybe.
I don't know. It does seem like Sigma wants to keep doing more. They want to make a pro camera. That's not this camera. This is a very strange camera. Yeah, this is like a camera you have with you all the time, kind of like your BFF, except for one less F. Like for people who haven't seen this thing, machined out of one block of aluminum, looking top down, it looks kind of like a trapezoid. Looking at all other sides, it looks like a block of aluminum. It has a shutter button and a power button that depress. Everything else is haptic buttons. Has a fixed screen that doesn't tilt. No EVF. An L mount. And this like wheel crazy interface. And it's like just super, super simple. As simple as you can imagine a camera. That's like I guess the brief on it costs $2,000.
Yep.
Daniel, top level, like, what do you think of this thing?
So I saw MKBHD in his video said this, and I think other people said it too. It's like if Apple made a camera, it feels like this is what it would be.
I've heard the opposite take where people are like, Apple wouldn't make this camera, and then they should put pictures of an iPhone.
Yeah, I guess so. But
Apple already makes a camera.
It looks like somebody's concept of what Apple would make as a camera, because it's
or at least Johnny Ive.
Solid aluminum. Honestly, doesn't look very ergonomic.
No,
they didn't like. They could have like rounded the edges a little bit. I don't know.
I have heard of people cutting themselves on it, on like some corners. Some of the corners are rounded. It has this like, if you look at the front of it, part of it's like machine textured and part of it's smooth.
Yeah,
and so there is something for you to kind of like grip with your fingers, and then there is a bit of a like an upturn for you to kind of thumb rest on it.
Yeah.
So between the thumb rest and the texture, it is actually manageably holdable as long as you don't have a 1.5 pound lens on it.
Well, it feels to me like the kind of camera where you end up holding the lens, and kind of using that to,
I can see
hold
that.
the camera. But I mean, I guess my overall impression of this is I think it's wildly impractical, and it's a little surprising to me that they would release it. But at the same time, I can't help but want one, mostly just to like have on the shelf. Like I think it looks really cool, and it's just so unique, and I like that about it.
It comes in like aluminum, like silver, and you can get it in black. I think the black looks super duper sleek, but the aluminum version pops really hard. And they released a lot of their contemporary primes, like the 45mm 2.8, the 35mm f2, and the 50mm f2, all in silver, so that you can mount those to this thing and match it. And I think like this camera plus the 35mm f2 contemporary L-mount lens, like just that, and you're good to go.
Yep. I mean, compare it to an S9. It's less functional in every way than an S9, and it's like $500 more expensive.
Yes.
So like if what you're buying for is practicality and usefulness, I think the S9 is like clearly the winner. This is clearly going for a different market where it's like people who are interested in the design of it and who like appreciate the like
simplicity.
Well, I don't know if it's simplicity, but it's just like the design trade-offs they've made. I guess it's simplicity.
Well, let me run through a few more kind of features on this thing that are maybe interesting. And I do really want to dig on like what's the point of this camera? It seems like one of the points is for it to be a beautiful object.
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
much like a Leica Q2, which the Leica Q2 also had a fixed screen.
Interesting.
But I think it had an EF. Anyways, so we mentioned $2,000. No flash, no hot shoe. The only port on it is USB-C. It has internal storage, like I think it's 256 gig internal storage.
Yeah, that's an interesting feature.
And
no card slots at all.
No card slots at all. It acts like a drive, like a USB, like I plugged in a T5 into my computer. Like you plug this thing into your computer, there's images.
Yep.
I've heard some kind of like complaints on, well, what if that fails and you have to repair the camera? Like, I mean,
say that about anything in a camera.
Yeah, but like I'd be surprised.
Yeah. I think more cameras should have internal storage as an option. Now, I do still like having a card slot, but like I would love if my camera also, in addition to the card slot, had 128 gigs built in. It's
kind of telling of where they're trying to market this camera, because if you look at any of the premium brands that one might compare this to, like if you're looking at a Hasselblad or a Leica, which are wildly more expensive than this thing, they all have internal storage. And those are the only ones that really have internal storage. And now this, at $2,000, now it's like, wow, what a steal. They put rubber on the bottom of it so that you're not scratching the aluminum whenever you put a base plate on or setting the camera down. So like it has a rubberized bottom, which is nice. All the buttons are haptic. Someone said that it has like glass over the sensor. There's no, it's all electronic shutter. There's no mechanical shutter, but there's like some layer over the sensor area to make it easier to clean if it gets dirty.
I mean, every sensor has some glass over it, but I guess like an additional layer or something.
I don't know. There was like one person that mentioned it, and I haven't found it in any of the specs, but I thought it worth kind of bringing up. Other things here, the autofocus seems to be like pretty decent. It's got like animal detect and human detect, and then like you can do both. I don't think there's any modes beyond that, but generally speaking, the autofocus seems like fairly competitive, like mostly good enough for what you would need out of a camera like this. And then they have like not film simulations, but like profiles.
Yeah.
And not just like sepia and vivid. They have 13 modes on this thing, and it's like standard, rich, calm, powder blue, warm gold, teal and orange.
So you get kind of some distinctive looks.
Yeah, Foveon Classic Yellow, Forest Green, Sunset Red, Cinema, RX 709, and Monochrome.
Mm-hmm.
And like they all look good. They're not like wildly distinct. They all have some tonal shifts to them, but sometimes with these, like, it seems like, you know, in you go back 10 years and you're looking at the modes on your camera and they're just like way too extreme and you'd never use them. Whereas Fuji kind of, you know, hey, here's some like film simulations and they all have like a distinct look, but they're not, you want to use all of them. They don't all look absurd. And this kind of feels like the same thing where here's a lot of really interesting profiles and none of them are like too far one way or the other. And you could like see yourself capturing images in any of these. And I really like kind of like how they laid this out. The RAWs are in DNG, so they're extremely workable. They're working basically everything. As far as like how this thing, like the formats this thing shoots in as onto like an internal storage, the JPEGs, the DNGs, the color profiles, this all seems pretty good.
Yeah.
And this 24 megapixel sensor is it's a decent sensor.
Yeah.
I was editing 700 A7 III images this past week. And like in going through them, I'm like thinking about the L mount or the S1 Mark II and the S9 and the XH2S and the XT3 images that I've all edited. And like for those two
Lumix, S1 Mark II, I think you meant S5 Mark II.
Thank you, S5 Mark II. For those Lumix cameras, like they're cleaner at the same ISO compared to the A7 III. I know the A7 III is old at this point. Mm-hmm. It's like massively old, but the sensor in the S5 Mark II is also fairly old. Anyway, it's a good sensor. Like it was like a stop cleaner compared to the A7 III images that I was looking at. And I was like, wow, I'm actually surprised that the A7 III wasn't a cleaner looking sensor.
Yeah.
Anyways, there's a huge giant aside to this is going to produce very good images.
It feels like all the internals are really pretty good, and the main trade-offs with this camera are the externals,
like the form factor.
No flip screen, no EVF, very strange body design, and limited buttons.
It shoots video like 4K 30.
It feels like one of those cameras that shoots video as sort of like it shoots video if you need it, but you shouldn't buy this to do video.
I like that the battery is similar to how the Leica does the batteries, where it's not like you open a compartment and then the battery slides out. The battery is like a part of the camera, and so it just kind of like you just pop it in.
Oh, interesting.
And you just pop it out.
I didn't realize that. That's kind of cool.
It is kind of cool. So that's like rough overview. This back screen is supposed to be really, really nice. It's like 2 million dots or something like that, which is like nice, higher resolution than your normal back screen. Mm-hmm. So that's nice. It doesn't get bright enough. It was a big problem for everybody. In bright sunlight, you just can't see it.
Yeah.
There's no EVF. There's no tilting it. It's just like you're out of luck.
Mm-hmm.
The battery is also just okay. You're getting like less than 300 CEPA rated shots.
Interesting.
Anyway.
Surprising they didn't do better there, but and they can only I think you might have said this, they can only make 9 a day.
I didn't say that. That's true. They can only make 9 a day.
Yeah, I mean it's a solid block of aluminum.
But it's just so interesting.
Yeah,
it's so interesting if you want a camera for the look of having a camera, like you want it to be a stylish accessory, this is going to be top tier option for you.
Absolutely.
And it still takes really good images. You can have an all silver version and it would look incredible. I think in like general ease of use, it probably is going to kind of suck.
Yeah.
But it seems like what they were trying to go, even like with the name, as far as like what PF stands for, it's like they are trying to say like, what if we simplified this into its essence? Like what is like the most simple version we can make a camera that still has like full manual modes and still does camera stuff, but is like stripped all the way down so that it's like you're just like you're not going out of the moment, you're just taking the picture. it's like one step away from having no viewfinder, no image, whatever on the back. Like they could have gone like full pixie and have no, or what's the Leica Q3 version? No, it's an M version, the M7, M9.
Yeah, I know there is one. I just can't remember the name.
Anyways, there's like no viewfinder and just like rangefinder see through. Yeah. That feels like the most version of removing the camera from taking pictures.
Yep.
But this feels like one step back from the like get the camera out of taking your picture situation and just like I don't know.
Yep. It's very strange. Why do you think Sigma made it this way?
I think it was like a concept. I think that Sigma is not beholden to all of the stuff that the other camera companies are. They don't have a huge market share. They have this amazing lens ecosystem, and they're a small development team. Like I was watching one of the interviews that the CEO did. I can't remember with who, and talking about how like they have this big factory but small engineering and corporate team. And so they're structured so that they can maybe like spend some time and do some experimental cameras, and they're not a publicly owned company. And so they can just like do stuff like this because they want to.
Yeah, I think to me it feels kind of like a hobby project almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that the fact that they don't have a big user base for cameras kind of lets them do that, because I think about recently the Panasonic S1R Mark II came out. And there has been such an uproar about that camera because it's kind of divisive. Some people think it's great. Some people are just like shocked that it's not more video oriented than it was. And I think a lot of people feel like, I have expectations for Panasonic cameras, and I'm a big Panasonic camera guy, and like I'm upset because this isn't exactly what I wanted. And Sigma probably doesn't really have people that are thinking that about them. So it does give them some more flexibility to do it. It kind of made me feel like it's a concept in the sense that, for example, like Microsoft started making laptops and stuff because it kind of seemed like they did that because they wanted to show other manufacturers like this is what like you could do with a Windows laptop. Like this is how you could make it more premium or whatever. And I think we've seen other manufacturers kind of like follow in those footsteps. And so I kind of wonder if like Sigma as a lens company made this camera as a concept to kind of show other manufacturers like, hey, here's an idea that you could steal from if you wanted to. Maybe not exactly, but like here are some concepts that could be interesting, for another camera. And then Sigma as a big lens manufacturer probably wins, if there's more camera designs that people are interested in that pair well with Sigma lenses. So maybe it's like their way of trying to expand the camera industry in the way that they're able to influence that.
It definitely looks like a camera, but it looks nothing like a modern camera.
Yeah.
Which is really, really interesting. I think that there is a huge market out there of people who want something that's not their phone to take pictures with.
Mm-hmm.
And buying like a Canon R6 or something is a bit like, one, it doesn't look pretty like this looks pretty. And it seems like a whole thing to learn and a whole investment. Whereas this thing is super, super simple. And you could probably just leave it in mostly auto and just kind of take the picture and have the simple interface and it be very stripped down and look really stylish.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the X100V effect where that camera looks cool. And so people have it because it looks cool, but also it takes fun pictures.
Yeah.
I think this is going to satisfy a lot of that similar market. I think that people who aren't like camera nerds will see this and say, wow, that looks really cool. $2,000 isn't crazy. I didn't even know cameras had tilty screens.
Yeah.
And like they would buy this and be super happy with it. And like they get maybe one silver lens, maybe two. And like that's it. That's all they need. And I think that it fills or addresses a certain part of the market that isn't like the camera nerd part of the market. But also there's, those camera nerds that just want it because it looks cool.
That's me. Like I have no need for this. My S9 is a better camera than this. And like, I'm not going to buy one, but like, I'm not going to say I wouldn't like to have it just because I think it looks really cool and it's a neat concept. Like I appreciate that.
Yeah. It's just so interesting to think about. It's like it is in so many aspects inconvenient and missing features, but also like you just really want one.
Yeah. I think what you said, like one of its purposes is to be a beautiful object, and I think it succeeds at that.
Yeah, I think it does too. There's no world where I would like be shopping for this camera and not end up buying an S9.
Yeah.
Because like the S9 is everything that this is with so much more.
Especially if you can get it, with 3 lenses for free.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, geez, come on. And for actual use, like why would you not just buy an S9?
Yeah.
But if it's, I mean, the fashion of it and the want of the object, like the Sigma has some serious appeal here. And I think it's super interesting what they did. It's a low volume product and it's going to be unique and weird, which is just Sigma's lane for cameras.
Yep.
And I'm like really excited that they're doing stuff.
Yeah, me too. I hope we see more weird cameras from them.
Me too.
Like just, once a year, just drop something really strange.
Yeah, just like get out there, do some weird. I mean, all the Foveon stuff was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Let's just keep doing your thing, Sigma.
Yeah.
Okay, can we talk about one of these lenses on my list?
I think so.
Okay.
Which one do you want?
I wanted to talk about the 300 to 600 f4.
Okay. Because
this thing is something.
Yeah, and I think this probably was the lens that they were teasing, saying like this has never been done before. Which Sigma says that, and we're kind of like, okay, I'm watching. What do you got?
Like there isn't one of these. They obviously it's for E mount and L mount because L mount Alliance and Nikon and Canon don't want it. But it's a 300 millimeter, 600 millimeter. It costs $6,000. F4, which is really important. They dropped the DN from the name, so it's not a 300 600 f4 DN, which was their terminology for mirrorless lenses. All their lenses are mirrorless now.
Okay.
And it weighs 8.7 pounds or like 4 kilograms. And so you basically have to have it on a monopod.
Yeah, well, the constant aperture 300 to 600, it's not surprising that it weighs that much.
And they're saying that this is as good, this is Sigma's marketing material, as good as shooting with a prime. They're like, if you have a 400 millimeter prime, you have a 600 millimeter prime, this will be as sharp at f4 as that prime lens, which I don't believe, but I bet it's really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, it may not be quite as good, but I'm inclined to take Sigma seriously because they do care a lot about image quality, and that's something that I've generally felt like they succeeded at with their lenses, so I bet they got pretty close.
It's an interesting lens in that, depending upon what you compare it to, it's either the most incredible deal in photography or it is way too expensive. And so, like, if you look at Sony has a 400 to 800, which like nothing is in the 3600 range at this speed. Like you don't have a comparison. But the 400 to 800 6.3 to f8, way slower, is $2,800.
Okay.
The Sony 200 to 600 5.6 to 6.2, so covers the same range, but a stop slower. And variable aperture is $2,000.
That's a pretty good deal, though.
Yeah, so this is 3 times more expensive, but you're getting f4 at a constant aperture. If you compare it to the primes, the 600 millimeter f4 Sony is $13,000.
Jeez.
The Sony 300 2.8 is $6,000. The Sony 400 2.8 is $12,000, and the Sigma 500 5.6 is $2,800.
It says 280 on
I
this
forgot a zero, Daniel.
I was thinking I'm going to snatch that one up.
Yeah, scoop up that puppy. So, like, if you look at the primes, this thing is hyper competitive, especially if you consider that I'm shooting on Sony. If this thing is 80% as good as the 300, the 400, and the 600 at f4, even though some of those are 2.8, but like, boy, a 2.8 600 millimeter lens, can you imagine how razor thin the depth of field? Oh my gosh. Anyway, if this is 60% as good, you're going to save so much money buying this one lens versus spending $30,000 on those 3 primes, because 2 are 12 and 1 is 6. $30,000 versus $6,000 for something that is, I mean, we like, it's just preliminary. We don't have like test charts. We haven't like seen how well this performs. How does a vignette? Does it really work as good as they say? Like I said, if it's 60% as good, if it's 70% as good, this is an incredible deal.
It feels like, I mean, just comparing to all your other prices here, it's basically like it's a good deal if you need something that's fast in that focal range. Because if you can get by a little bit slower, then there are cheaper options. And so it makes me feel like if what you're doing is outdoors, like a birding situation or, shooting like an outdoor football game or something, like maybe you don't need this, but I think there are some situations where you would want that, like the extra light gathering of f4.
I think it's like perfectly in the middle because, and I just dropped a bunch of Sony lenses on here because like L mount, you're basically comparing to other Sigmas, and it's just only for E and L mount. Like the 200 to 600, 5.6 to 6.2 at $2,000 is the competition for this lens.
Yeah.
And I mean, like I said, we don't have test runs and whatever, but I would bet that this Sigma lens is going to be much better image quality than that Sony lens.
Yeah, that would be my guess too.
And if you're sitting there with a 200 to 600 and you're like, boy, I wish I had better image quality at the long end, what do? I mean, like maybe you get a 70 to 200 and put it on a teleconverter, but maybe that's not that much better. And you're like, okay, well, I guess I need to get a 300 2.8 for $6,000. I think buying this zoom just makes sense. It slots right in the middle as like, yeah, you're spending $6,000 on this lens, but you're not spending 12, and you're not spending 12 three times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm probably not going to buy a $6,000 lens, but I can more easily picture myself buying a $6,000 lens than a $12,000 lens.
For sure. I think this is an incredible option, and I'm like so curious to see how its performance is, but to me it seems like a possible market disruptor. Mm-hmm. And like one of the reasons that you might not buy this lens if you're on Sony is like Sony has a cap at 15 frames per second on their burst rates for third-party lenses. And it's like this lens is another reason why Canon probably doesn't want it on RF mount, is because that's $6,000 or $12,000 that they're not going to make.
Yeah.
I mean, for Sony, if you buy this lens instead of a 300 and a 600, like Sony could have made $18,000 on you, and instead Sigma's making $6,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've actually talked about that before, that it feels like a difference in Canon and other brands in terms of strategy, where I think for Canon, they are, relying maybe on that lens revenue more than Sony is. And with Sony, they're making a lot of money on their cameras. And while they make very good lenses, they've been, more willing to let these other companies come in. Canon's definitely not that way. For sure.
So I thought this one was really interesting. It's got a lot of cool features. It's got all the custom buttons on it. The plate that you use to like mount it, like the tripod mounting thing, you can get it with the Arca Swiss base or the non-Arca Swiss base, which is something that camera manufacturers has started doing that I super love.
Yeah.
And I wish that my like one lens that has the tripod base had the Arca Swiss mount on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess you could just like screw one on there and leave it on there.
You could screw one on there, but this one is just like built in.
Yeah, it's clever to have it built in.
It's super cool. You can buy this thing without that if you just really don't want it. The other thing is that like it'll swivel, but if you're going to switch between like portrait and landscape, you can kind of like turn that mount around. Mm-hmm. There's an option to have it click or declick, so that whenever it goes between the 290 degrees, it like click.
Oh, that's neat.
You can have it not do that, so it's just a smooth turn. Mm-hmm. It's cool that that's an option.
Yeah,
super cool.
Yeah, I like what we're seeing from lenses now. I mean, it seems like there's been a couple of cases recently where we've seen kind of new things in terms of, here's not just a new 24 to 70 or 7200, and instead we're going to give you a 28 to 70 at f2 or whatever they're doing. And there was a rumor recently that Panasonic might be coming out with a 24 to 60 lens at f2, and like it's just I like seeing like these different combinations, different trade-offs, and this is a good example where it gives you a focal length and aperture that are different than anything you can get now, and I'd rather see that than like an iterative improvement on one of the existing designs.
Yeah, I generally agree with that. That rumor about the 24 to 60 versus like the 28 to 70s that we've been seeing, that's pretty exciting, especially since for L mount you can already get the 28 to 70 Sigma version. If you got to pick between that and a 24 to 60, that's pretty cool to be able to make that decision. You can decide if you want the longer or the shorter end.
Yeah, there's those, and then we've seen like the 24 to 105s that are f2.8. Yep. That exists on both L and RF.
Yep.
And E. Yeah, and it's just, I like having those choices, and it's not always going to be the right choice because often like those might be more expensive, or maybe it's not exactly the focal length you want. But like, give me the option, give me different things to choose from rather than here's the version 1 24-70 and the version 2 24-70. I mean, obviously I want things to improve over time, but I'd rather have like more more differences to choose from than just that.
These different lens options are like make or break to me on choosing a system.
For sure.
Like if when I ever leave the APS-C world and like go into full frame, I don't have an investment right now in anything that's full frame. And so it'd be like open season for me as a total camera nerd, and deciding like which ecosystem would really, really come down to the lenses, and being able to pick a lens that, oh, this is like really fast at this range, and so I could like not buy a prime here, or these are like cheaper zooms. I could buy like a different Trinity for less money from one manufacturer, or like a 24 to 105. Like maybe I can get away with that and not buy a 70-200 because I don't need the 105 to 200 range. Like having those options within different manufacturers kind of really pushes the decision, because you can optimize your lens arrangement.
Yeah, I agree. It's there's so much to consider, and like with the cameras, like you can't get everything you want, right? Like let's say you like L mount, well maybe you can't get the camera features you want in L mount, and that could be a problem. But at the same time, you can have the opposite problem where, well, I really like the Canon R5 II as an option, but I just can't get the lenses that I want. And it's just like another big variable you have to consider in this stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, people always say like, date bodies, marry lenses and that sort of thing. And we often say that the cost of switching is probably not as extreme as it seems in many cases. But it does make the decision pretty hard, because you can't just like pick the camera and then know that you're going to have the same lens choices.
Yeah.
And I'm like really excited about all these new lens types that we're seeing for mirrorless cameras, but it does make the decisions a lot more complicated.
I wish we would see more alliances. At that CP Plus show, there was an L mount alliance presentation, and they were actually saying they'd like to get more manufacturers into the L mount alliance. Like that's a goal they have, like to expand it. And I appreciate that E mount is so open, and it seems like Z mount is getting there too, where Sigma and Tamron make lenses for Z. I mean, Canon's kind of the outlier here, but even within those more open ones like E and Z, obviously there's still lenses that you can't get. Like if you're on L mount, you can't use a Sony lens. And that stuff still exists. So it's a shame it's not more open than it is, but I feel like it's better than it used to be.
For sure. I mean, I would love to see Carlos Zeus join the L mount alliance.
Absolutely.
And
also Carl Zeiss, but
that too.
We really want both of them.
It really do, definitely, because one makes much cheaper lenses.
Yes.
What would be like a total dark horse in this situation is if Canon joined the L mount alliance. And they're like, you know what? What if we sold third-party lenses and they just started releasing all of their lenses to compete with Sigma and L mount?
Oh man, that would be a really funny way to do that.
Yeah, it would.
I don't have anywhere to go from there.
Okay.
That's it for the show today. Thanks for joining us, and if you liked it, tell a friend so they can check it out too. You can find out more about the show at www.cameragearpodcast.com, and you can find us on Twitter @CameraGearPod. We'll be back with more next week.